Now that we've covered modes fairly extensively and looked at some chord progressions for each mode, I'd like to share one of my favorite ways to make interesting chord progressions using modes. It's using a technique called modal interchange, which is basically when you have one mode and you have a chord progression in that mode, and you take a chord or two from a chord progression from some other mode and stick it right back into your original mode progression. So you're borrowing a chord from one mode and sticking it in another. So here are 3 examples of chord progressions that use modal interchange, and I'll take them apart and explain them in a bit. But first, let's just listen to them and see how this stuff sounds so you can see why you'd want to learn about this anyway. So here's a little bit of A Dorian mixed with a little bit of A Phrygian. Next up, we've got a little bit of A Lydian mixed with a little bit of A Aeolian. Now we have A Aeolian and then just a pinch of A Dorian. So we're going to look at each of these chord progressions and talk about how that all worked. In each of the chord progressions I just played, you'll notice that all of the modes that I used had A as home bass. So we'd start out sounding like one mode with A as home bass, like A Dorian, A Phrygian. Then we'd take a chord or two from another mode that also has A as the home bass. We'd mix them together. So in the first example, I played the chords A minor, B minor, and C, which puts us in the mode A Dorian. Take a second to remember what number mode is Dorian. Like, which mode is Dorian? Is it the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, or eighth? Well, there's no eighth. 1 through 7. And also, let's figure out what key A Dorian is in, just for review. So take a second. What number mode is Dorian, and what key is A Dorian in? Dorian is the second mode, and therefore in A Dorian, that means that A is the second note of the key we're in. Therefore, G is the first note of the key. A is 2, G is 1, which makes us in A Dorian in the key of G. And we know we're in A Dorian and not like G Ionian or G major or something, because A sounds like home bass even though we're in the key of G. So that's just some review for you. Anyway, I'm in A Dorian, I'm playing A minor, B minor, and C, and then I decided, alright, well, let's throw in some chords from A Phrygian. So I went to this other progression I know in A Phrygian, which goes like this. And I took the F major 7 and the B flat major 7 from that progression. I just took those 2 chords and I just stuck them in. I borrowed them and stuck them into my A Dorian progression. So I played the Dorian progression and then I brought in those 2 chords. Here comes F major 7, then B flat major 7. So here's our Dorian section. Now here's our Phrygian section. Back. Really nice. Adds a little bit of tension. I really love that. In this next example, we're going to take a nice little taste of A Lydian. Alright, we're going to take these chords from A Lydian, A major, with our open E and B strings, which really makes this an A major 9 chord because we have an A major chord and we've added a B to it. And if A is 1, then B is 2, And if we're throwing the 2 on top of a triad or a 7th chord, we call it the 9. So when you add the 2, the 4, the 6 to a chord, it gets an extra special high name. You add 7 to that number, so 2 gets 9, 4 gets 11, 6 gets 13. If that just totally sounded like gibberish to you, I would go back to the naming chords lesson and just go over it there, because I explain it in depth. And it's really helpful to know, especially when you're writing chord progressions. It's great to know about all the different kinds of chords that are available to you. So naming chords, that's the way to get there. But yeah, we had an A9 because it's A major with a B on top. And now we have B major 11 because it's B major with an E on top. And so we've got these 2 chords, and they fit really nicely in A Lydian. That's a real Lydian sound. And then what we did was, I've got this other Aeolian progression that I like, which is just your basic 1, 4, 5 minor, 1 minor, 4 minor, 5 minor, like this: A minor, D minor, E minor, then A minor. You know, it's a really nice straight ahead Aeolian progression. And what I did was I took the D minor from that progression, which is this one, and I just stuck that into my A Lydian progression. So I've got this Lydian, Lydian, Lydian. But here's some Aeolian back to Lydian. Just nice, very Beatlesy kind of tension thing. And you know, at this point, go ahead and make your own A Lydian progression, and find an A Aeolian progression as well. And pick just one chord from the A Aeolian progression and stick it into your Lydian progression. You'll get maybe different combination of chords, but you'll get similar results. It'll add some tension and add some color to your chord progression. So give that a try, and then we'll go to the third example. For our third example, let's look at a really classic progression that uses modal interchange. What we're going to do is take this Aeolian progression here. That's A minor, G major, F. Very common. You've heard it in many songs. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this A Dorian progression, which you can find in the song Karma Police by Radiohead, for example. That progression is A minor, F sharp minor 7 flat 5, then E minor, then G. And what we're going to do is we're going to just take the F sharp minor 7 flat 5 and put it into our original Aeolian progression. We're going to stick it right in there, and here's the result we'll get. Here's one last important note about modal interchange. Sometimes 2 modes, even if they're in different keys, will share some chords in common. For example, in A Dorian and A Aeolian, the chord E minor fits in both modes. So you want to make sure that the chord you borrow to put in your original mode isn't a chord that's already shared between both modes, because otherwise you won't really hear a modal interchange effect. It'll just sound like you're staying in the original mode without any particular embellishment or added color from the borrowed chord. So make sure that your borrowed chord isn't a chord that's shared between both modes you're working with.